Welcome to Senate Utilities Committee. We've got a quick update today, first of all, on the natural gas price situation from last week. Due to the extreme cold we heard yesterday from one group, today we're hearing from Kimberly Spotty about the gas situation. Open it up to a few questions for Kimberly, so I'll turn the floor over to Kimberly.
Committee. I appreciate the opportunity to be here before you. My name is Kimberly Swati, and I do appear before you this afternoon on behalf of the Kansas Municipal Utilities. I'm going to throw out a couple acronyms. I apologize. So there's Kansas Municipal Utilities, and we are the trade association for the state's community-owned electric, natural gas, water, and wastewater utilities. We have 3 joint action agencies, which of course have to have their own individual acronym as well. So Kansas Power Pool, KPP, based in Wichita, Kansas Municipal Energy Agency, based in Overland Park, and Kansas Municipal Gas Agency, also based in Overland Park. So today, the bulk of my comments are going to focus on Kansas Municipal Gas Agency, and then we're going to talk a little bit about Kmga as well. So just wanted to provide a little bit of context about what happened really from our standpoint beginning at 3 p.m. on Friday, February 12th. So I received a phone call from one of my bosses, and he said, oh my goodness, we're starting to catch wind that the natural gas market literally has gone mad. And the market won't close yet for another 2 hours, but we're starting to get really concerned about some of the pricing we're seeing. This is, of course, Friday. It's already cold on Friday, and we know that the bottom is literally going to drop out of the temperatures in the state over the course of the next 3 days. So with that, I want to walk you a little bit through about who Kmga is, these cities, and how we procure gas. So Kansas Municipal Gas Agency is based in Overland Park. We have, there are roughly 53 communities in the state of Kansas that have their own community-owned natural gas utility. Many of those utilities are members of Kansas Municipal Gas Agency. But in this specific scenario, we're talking about 31 cities who Kmga procures natural gas supply for. So we are a nonprofit organization. There's no profit motive there. Whatever we procure gas for, there's a small administrative fee, and then it flows straight to the communities. So our natural gas purchasing strategy is basically the same as that of every other player in the natural gas industry, and that is we buy a third of our power, natural gas, on a fixed long-term fixed price contract. We buy a third on a fixed monthly contract. We optimize our storage. So we do have storage capabilities on the natural gas side. Of course, there are physical limitations to the amount of natural gas that can be stored. And then there are regulatory limitations on the amount of natural gas that can be stored during off-peak, which would be the summer months, and the amount of natural gas that can be withdrawn during peak time. So when we were in this situation last week, there are regulations surrounding how much can be pulled out of storage. So we use a third on our long-term fixed contracts, a third on our monthly fixed contracts. We optimize storage, and then we have to go out and for the balance, we will secure that on the market. And the process of securing power on the market is in the morning before 7 a.m., you nominate your needs for whatever the projections will be, minus what we have on our fixed contracts and in storage. So Friday morning, February 12th, we go in and we nominate what our needs will be, and the needs are it's a weekend, so it's for Saturday, Sunday, Monday. When you're purchasing power on Friday, it's for Saturday, Sunday, Monday use. This was a holiday weekend. It was President's Day weekend, so in this case, we added an extra day, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. You nominate your needs, and then the marketers come back and they'll say, okay, it's index plus 5 cents, index plus 10 cents. We always choose index plus whatever the lowest cost option is. So we locked in our needs, and we did so for the next 4 days. The market then, however, you all, does not close for another 10 hours. So At that point, the situation began to really unfold as to what was happening down in Texas and in Oklahoma, particularly with natural gas supply, with wellhead freeze-offs and just a significant tightening in supply. And you had the electric utilities who now all of a sudden were in the marketplace, essentially competing for the same molecule to power their natural gas-fired generation. So that created a very different dynamic in the natural gas market. And so the market responded, and it truly did go haywire. And by the time I received a phone call at 3 p.m. on Friday, we were looking at market prices instead of around the $3 an MMBTU, upwards of $200 an MMBTU. So picture going to the gas station in the morning and saying, okay, I'm going to pay $3 for a gallon of gas. You go back in the afternoon, and that same gallon of gas is over $200. So just for perspective, we knew right away that, oh my gosh, this is a really big deal. For perspective, the peak that we've seen in natural gas pricing occurred in 2014 during the polar vortex, which was right around this time. It was in early March in 2014, and the peak natural gas price hit $34 an MMBTU. So on Monday, February 9th, we were looking at natural gas prices around $3 an MMBTU. On Wednesday, the 11th, we were looking at, they had trended upward as the forecasts were coming in, $6 to $7 an MMBTU. So we were already like, okay, there's going to be some pretty big increases. But you can handle that. You can manage through a $6 to $7. By Thursday, 24 hours later, that price was upwards of $45. So we were already well beyond that peak price. And then, of course, the markets ultimately ended up, in the case of our utilities, we saw prices on our different pipelines ranging from $210 an MMBTU all the way to $375 an MMBTU. So, whoa, we spent the weekend entirely on the phone with anyone and everyone. The first priority, of course, was making sure that, we knew that the market, when it opened on Tuesday, was going to be very chaotic as well. And we knew that we had supply Monday and Tuesday, but the key was going to be what happened on Wednesday. And so we knew we had to make sure that we had supply for our customers into those communities, even though we knew we were going to be facing extreme price impacts. So first priority was keeping that supply going. Not secondly, but like 1A and 1B was we knew what that was going to mean to our communities, because in 4 days for Kmga's annual budget of natural gas purchasing is around $8.5 million for the entire year for 31 cities. For procuring power for those 4 days, it was more than $30 million. So again, we knew the very stark reality. And, we also recognize that we are a bit of a canary in the coal mine, if you will, since the prices that we see are, they flow directly to the cities, who then flow them directly to the customers. There is no, there's not a buffer. We don't have our regulatory structure, which was affirmed which was interesting. It was absolutely affirmed in Senate Bill 69, the rate study, as being in the public interest. We don't have a profit motive. We don't have shareholders. And so we don't have that buffer, if you will. And that's not a good thing or a bad thing. It just makes the situation very real very quickly for our customers. So what are we doing now, and what have we been doing? Immediately, FERC, of course, was closed over the holiday weekend, but we were in regular contact with our folks at FERC to do two things. One, alert them to the pricing situation, and two, to try and work with them to make sure that natural gas supply continued to flow. We were in contact with the governor's office, most of the cabinet members, to just talk with them about the situation, explain to them what we were seeing on the pricing side, and how we were going to try and manage through that. We have made various FERC filings. We've actually asked for some investigations related to pricing. We've been in regular communications with the Attorney General's office. just asking them to investigate some of the pricing. And that's not abnormal. We're now starting to see that, of course, certainly from a more regional basis. Many other states are asking the same questions. I think for a little while we were worried that perhaps we were, on an island and that this may have been only impacting us. But as the days unfolded over the course of that particular weekend, and then certainly over the course of the last week, we've realized the true extent of the situation. And it's certainly not just, these 31 communities in Kansas. It is widespread across the entire state of Kansas, across the entire Midwest, ranging from Canada all the way down to Texas. And we are very lucky. Our system and the way we've invested in the systems prevented a Texas-like situation from happening here. So we believe very strongly that we did act on behalf of the customers in making, a lot of the FERC filings to keep that natural gas supply flowing, to keep the electrons flowing. We did have 2 managed load shedding events that were relatively modest, and those kept the grid up and stable. So we believe very much in the processes that were put in place. We've been in absolute regular contact with our federal delegation on the situation, on pricing, and then also what can be done in order to help these communities and these customers. And really, it is the customers. And so we are looking at, is there any additional CARES Act money that hasn't been spent? Could that be used? Is there, the next stimulus package? Can we look at funding, pouring additional money into the LIHEAP program, maybe taking some of those income restrictions off? Because I think at this point, the pricing that could be seen by customers will impact everyone. So we've talked about that. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to appear before the House Appropriations Committee and request a piece of legislation that after 12 days of scouring and sorting through lots of different ideas, and at times running into dead ends, and at other times, getting further down the tracks to realize that maybe that won't be a workable solution. We think that we've actually come up with one possible solution. This is going to be, we need a toolbox, and so this is going to be a tool. So first and foremost, on the natural gas side and on the electric side, we are going to do our very best to try and hold those bills at the agency level and try and explore a way to, over time, flow that back into customers' rates, but to where they're not getting hit with a single bill. Boom. So that is one thing that we are absolutely working on. We're also going to introduce this piece of legislation tomorrow that would alter the cash basis statutes modestly, and it would allow for no fund warrants to be issued. Therefore, the cities could issue bonds to absorb some of the costs and then pay those bonds out over the course of, we're changing the time frame from 3 years to up to 10 years, but realistically, it might be a 3 to 5, potentially to 7 year sort of payback. So we are looking at that, again, as a tool. Nothing is the full hammer that we feel like as a state we may need, but it is a tool. Trying to think what else I'm missing. There's also some conversations about some other potential vehicles that could work to provide another tool, but I feel like those are probably a little bit premature at this point, so best to have those fleshed out a little bit more before I present those topics to this committee. But I think that it's most important for you all to know that literally since 3 p.m. last Friday, February 12th, this has been our sole life. Paul Malberg, Colin Hansen, myself, and many, 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 many others trying to focus on how do we make sure, do we take care of these communities and these customers, keep the supply flowing, but then also try and work with them to help shield them as best as possible from the market that really, truly did go haywire. And that was 1,000% beyond any of our control. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Senator Olson.
Just a comment. I've been studying energy for a long time. Sat next to your husband for a long time. Is the exact reason why I don't support dereg on power. I watched what happened in California, and this situation could happen here. We're talking about how we're going to pay for it, But you know, the real problem with this, it was investors on Wall Street that took this money from our cities. And, you know, until they stop short selling, we're watching stuff going on with GameStop and a lot of other things. A lot of manipulation. This money, we'll never get it back. And, you know, the market was manipulated. They seen the weather forecast and they, you know, short sold it. And, you know, this is the chance in the future when we dereg power. You know, just go back and watch the Enron story. There's a documentary on it. It was $60 billion in California. I bet you this one right here was even bigger than that. And we won't really know how far reaching it was for a couple of years, but it was Wall Street and the short selling that caused it. If anybody wants to do anything to fix this, tell Congress stop short selling.
One of the, not going to speak necessarily on the deregulated side, but there is a really interesting article in the Wall Street Journal that just ran about the Texas deregulated market. But we did speak, through Governor Kelly, a week ago, Wednesday, we did have a conversation with President Biden about the Natural Gas Act. Essentially, that's what deregulated the natural gas industry. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but there was only one person that had the ability to put a price control on the market, and it's the president, him or herself. At that point, the markets had already started to calm down, and so, where we saw them on February 12th just going straight up through the roof, by that last Friday, and then certainly this Monday, natural gas was trading back down in the $2 range. So we did, seek out a possible price cap, but at that point, it was, almost, it was moot. But it was a very surreal thing to watch and experience.
Senator Bowers, and then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Kimberly. I think it's important that the committee know how much you've stayed in touch with us. I have 2 cities, and they're not really big cities, but 2 towns on the list. And I do have one of the little towns listening in. So what is your advice to them? They're going to have $300,000 plus bill. What are they to do now? Can you give them some advice, because they're hearing you? And I'll pass on whatever the state, whatever we do here to help them, but what do you want them to know?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I greatly appreciate the question. We have looked at, Senator Bowers, we've looked at, can we, roll this up to a FEMA disaster declaration? So the city could declare a disaster, the county needs to request, or the county can declare a disaster, which then can be provided to the state and serve as the basis for a state disaster, or a state request for a federal disaster declaration. So Governor Kelly declared a disaster Sunday, the 14th at 4:40 p.m., which really served as the basis for the Kansas Corporation Commission to enter and make some adjustments as well to ensure natural gas supply was continuing to flow, and to just begin the conversations as to how we were going to hold the money. So one thing is, we were, and cities still are looking at these disaster declarations. So some city ordinances do require them to declare a disaster. In some cases, it may be a financial disaster. Cities have a requirement that, obviously they can't deficit spend. So in some instances, it is a city disaster declaration. And through the league, they have graciously drafted a template that many cities are now using for this disaster declaration. Another point that we are also noting is it's our understanding that when cities receive a bill that is an abnormal bill, exorbitant bill, if you will, that they have the ability to delay payment on that to do an audit. And so, this would probably constitute an abnormal bill. And so, we would need to audit that. And that could potentially also perhaps buy some time for us to figure out, how we're going to try and hold this at the Kmga level or the Kmea level. But now there are cities that are not part of some of those joint action agencies. And so that's where we need to provide another tool. And that other tool is this piece of legislation that we will seek introduction of tomorrow in appropriations that adjusts the cash basis, the note fund warrant provision. That does take a little bit of time, but we're also kind of hoping that that audit, if you will, of the bill will provide them time to begin the discussion of issuing those bonds. So we are, as I can't stress this enough, there is not one single solution. It's going to take a lot of different vehicles and to help a lot of communities and a lot of customers, regardless of who their provider is, to manage through this time.
Senator Corson?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I had the pretty much identical question to Senator Bowers, but with respect to individual homeowners. I'm sure I'm not alone, and a lot of us are getting emails from constituents who are saying, what are my bills going to look like? What should I expect? And you really capably explained kind of all of the different things that are being done to try to triage that. But because you're so smart on this issue, what's just kind of like a short, succinct message that you think that all of us who are getting those messages should be conveying to our constituents about what they should expect in the near term with respect to their bills?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Corson. And, I must say that there are many of my colleagues sitting in this room as well that represent the companies that also serve your constituents. So I certainly don't want to speak for them. I'm going to stay in my lane, if you will. But I think that those individuals would probably be best equipped to answer how their particular companies and organizations are going to seek to manage through this time. So I'm not trying to deflect, but I don't want to speak on behalf of anyone else.
No, that's totally fair. I totally get it. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Any other questions, committee? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Kimberly, for being here and for offering legislators the opportunity last week to catch up on some of what was happening. So my understanding, and I'm certainly appreciative that the bills are there and that people are going to try to extend the time to pay those bills. So that's really helpful. But if we extend the time through next winter, what do we need to do between now and then to make sure that if next winter there's another 4, 5, 8 days of below freezing weather, we have a different way, because we can't stack up these bills. We could pay this if it's a one-time occurrence, but winter is usually coming around every year.
Right. No, it's a very good question, Senator. And undoubtedly, there are going to be, well, I can't say undoubtedly, but I would think that there will be many reforms that come out of this situation. Certainly this was, and I hate to use the word unprecedented, because, we're just coming out of 2020 and everything was unprecedented, but it was a historic event in the severity of the temperatures and the prolonged nature of the extreme cold, and then how widespread it was. And so I do think that creates a bit of a standalone situation, which is going to necessitate reforms. And some of those will come by way of technology, and that, the technology that's used further north for different forms of generation, just when we have winterization packages, perhaps that is extended further south. I think that there will be those sorts of reforms. But I think there will also be a lot of conversations on what we can do to ensure that this sort of situation doesn't happen again. Those conversations are all starting right now. And I don't have better answers for you other than to say that there are people that are already raising those issues. And so I think that we'll be looking for answers to help ensure that it doesn't happen again.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if there's any way that this committee could be part of those, I'm sure there's interest, because we're not going to be able to wait till next January. So even if it takes something like a special session, and there are ideas about what could be done, I'd rather look at that than be talking about the same issue next year.
Agreed.
Senator Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it all comes back to Wall Street. I mean, is there something that the Attorney General can do to look into, maybe see if there was some kind of manipulation, file a case from Kansas's point of view to try to make everybody whole? Because I think that's the aspect. There's, that point it went from $3 to whatever it did, 200, 300, 400. Were there people buying the contracts that didn't have a place to store it, use it? There's manipulation somewhere. Someone, I don't know.
So you ask a really good question, and at some points, our peak on our system, on the Kmga system, was $622 an MMBTU when it was when it was $3 an MMBTU. So something happened. And we have been in contact, we have been working with the Attorney General. He has sent out a friendly letter to all of our cities with a series of questions to begin that discussion and begin that investigation. Other attorney generals in other states have done the same. Governor Kelly and the Kansas Corporation Commission wrote a letter to FERC asking for an investigation to be opened and for FERC to put its full weight behind such an investigation. Senator Marshall and the congressional delegation, Representative Davids, I don't want to misspeak, but I believe the entire congressional delegation sent a similar letter to FERC asking for such investigation. So that is a very important step. We were pleased to really push hard on those requests, to look at what happened in the market, but those are multi-year investigations, and it's not always clear that any relief actually ever does flow back down to the customer.
It was one thing if we didn't have the gas to get out of the wellhead, but if we had the gas and people just manipulated by multiple people buying it, that's another issue. And if we don't fix it, the city's just got socked a bunch of money, and it's just going to happen again and again and again until it gets fixed.
I'll just leave it at one last point, that there's a fantastic graph that I'll send to you all, and I just received it actually. It demonstrates production capabilities in the lower 48 for 2021, and it shows how the production literally just came to a dead halt for a couple day period. I'll forward this to you. It was very interesting. That doesn't take anything away from what ultimately did happen in the market, but I thought it was a really shocking graph. We've done 2 informational Zooms for members of the legislature, one a week ago Monday, one a week ago tomorrow. I've tried to send you all of the links to those Zooms. A lengthy email went out yesterday afternoon, so hopefully you have literally all of the information that we're sending out to our communities. We're trying to be absolutely as transparent as possible, but if there are more questions that you have, more information is needed, we will do our very best to get answers and we're in major data collection mode right now.
One question. I'm guessing you're probably looking at restructuring how you do your contracts too, so you don't get caught in this situation. Or can you? I don't know.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. We are certainly looking at that very closely, and we'll continue to take a hard look at that. The way we handle our contracting has worked very well since 1990. It's when Kmga was first founded. It's pretty much the industry standard. I certainly think everything is on the table for exploration, but we do take a little bit of solace in knowing that it wasn't just us, and that it wasn't any fallacy on the part of our contract or buying methodology, but all of those questions are on the table, and it ultimately may end up necessitating some change to the broader industry on how gas supply is procured. I don't know, but I think every question's fair game now.
Any other questions? Senator Fagg?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In listening to you, Kimberly, you talked about the third. My question would be around the storage side of that. When we went into this incident, was our storage full at that time? So we had our third storage. How much can we store?
So again, that's a very good question. I don't specifically have the answer to how much our different communities are capable of storing, but I can, through Kmga, get you the answer. I do know that we were maximizing our storage capabilities for those communities that do have the ability to store.
So when they store it, that lasts for like 3 days. You was talking about Wednesday in there, where you was going to run into that kind of thing. So the storage doesn't last very long is what it sounds like to me.
So there are, and some of the individuals that represent the pipelines can probably also speak better to this, but there are physical limitations to how much we can store, both in the pipes and in underground storage. So there's a physical limitation, but then there's also restrictions on how much we can inject in off-peak times, like in the summer. So how much we can buy and then inject into storage. There's also limitations on how much we can pull out of storage. And in some instances, we were looking out for penalties for pulling out of storage being 2.5 times index. So if index was around $500 in MMBTU, and we were going to have to take penalties at 2.5 times index, you're looking at $1,750 in MMBTU. So that's not really something that could be done.
Senator Bile?
I've got a question just out of curiosity. You're talking about buying. Do you ever sell or trade?
We have a natural gas manager, and I would like to ask that question specifically of her. We are not marketers. So to the extent that we seek out a daily RFP or a monthly RFP or a long-term RFP, we are seeking that out from the market, and then we lock that in. But as far as engaging in trading behavior, it is my understanding that that's not something that we are not traders.
Well, I'm just curious because if you're storing it and the market's high enough, I just want to know if you ever sell. Are you telling me you've never sold?
I will ask that specific question of our natural gas manager. And again, to last week when the natural gas prices were so high, there are restrictions on our ability to pull out of storage and penalties for pulling out of storage prematurely. So
That doesn't prevent selling.
and I will ask that specific question.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
One last question from me, and then I think we need to move on. The wellhead freezing, is that because there wasn't, is that from the nozzles, the regulators that are freezing up? Is it because there wasn't any gas flowing through lines, or explain that very quickly?
I can give you a layman's perspective of what was going on and just what I've read about, but we may have some individuals that actually, from the pipelines that may be able to specifically answer that. I wouldn't want to speak on their behalf.
Okay.
Trying to dodge, but
It's not a pressing question at this point, just one that I had, but I didn't know.
it is yeah.
Gotcha. If there's any other questions before we leave on this subject, or if
Someone from the pipelines in the room that could answer that?
Okay, dope.
Mr. Chairman, Michael Gillespie, One Oak, Director of Government Relations. Make a big clarification. One Oak is not a producer. One Oak is not a utility. And so this is just answering as far as the pipelines connecting to the wellheads. In Oklahoma and Texas, they do not normally use methanol, which helps keep the pipes flowing. That is more or less a winterizer type thing that we use in North Dakota or Kansas that helps the product continue to flow. So because they don't use that, with the amount of water and other associated liquids that are part of pulling out of the ground, there's potential for more wellhead freeze-offs the further south you go because of less potential winterization.
And I understand that's what happened with ERCOT. They did.
Right. And there were never a pipeline freeze. You really can't, it's almost impossible once because the gas is so dry. It's literally at a wellhead type situation where the initial product is coming out of the ground.
Senator Pop?
Yeah, along the lines of my question, how soon can we get an answer on that about selling? Because, generally in the marketplace, you can get in and buy at 3 and watch it go to 70 or whatever and make money. You can also get in at 70 and sell and watch it go back to 3 and make the same exact amount of money. I'm not trying to insult. Everybody probably knows this, but it's just, these people that trade or these entities that are trading are buying and selling, and that's what makes the marketplace work. We got caught with a storm, and not trying to defend anything, there's answers, but I want to know if they're ever selling, because I just want to see the trading.
Senator Pyle, I will get that question for you yet this afternoon and send it to Sheila to send around to the committee. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I appreciate the update on that, and we will close that topic. We do have one bill to work, and that is Senate Bill 133, and I'm going to have Matt give us an overview of this. Mr. Advisor, if you can speak to Senate Bill 133, that's the exempting the retail sale of electricity by public utilities for electric vehicle charging stations. Matt?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yeah, as a reminder, the chairman said most of the bill. So Senate Bill 133 would amend the KSA 66104 concerning definition of public utilities that are subject to KCC jurisdiction. So the bill would exempt from regulation any activity of an otherwise jurisdictional entity for the purpose of the provision of electric vehicle charging service to end users. Be happy to try to answer questions the committee might have.
Any questions for the advisor? Did you have one? I don't see any at this point, so we'll open it up to discussion on the bill. Thank you, Mr. Advisor. Any discussion on this bill? Senator Hawk?
I just have a question for anybody on this committee. If we pass this, what prevents price gouging? We just kind of talked about that relative to the gas in terms of whatever that, if there's no regulation, what stops somebody who may have the only charging station within a 10 or 20 mile period from, instead of charging 10, 15, 20 cents per unit, to charge $10 or $20 a unit, knowing they might have a captive audience? Just curious if anybody has any thoughts on that.
I'm guessing at this point it'd be the market price and supply and demand. So if you were the only guy in 20 miles, you might have a pretty good deal. But I don't know, Senator Olson?
Yeah, I'm not going to try to answer his question. I can't support this bill for a couple reasons. I think we need to really maybe have a, summer interim to look at the effects. Right now we pay a gas tax. And, if we start putting these charging across the state and allowing this, there's a lot of people that will not be paying in to keep our roads up, but they're using them. We need to look at a way to put a fee on it that is fair for the guy that's driving down the road, paying the gas tax, as well as a fee on these people that are buying these electric cars. They could be driving through our state and using these facilities, and we're getting nothing for our highways to maintain. I think this is the perfect time to sit down. Let's figure out, if we're going to have these charging stations all across the state, that there's a fee that's going to be an X number where they have to pay, that's going to go into, our gas tax fund to recover, to take care of our highways. Because what's going to happen is the hybrids transition to all electric, you all of a sudden are not going to have a lot of gas tax revenue, and we're not going to have the money to keep our highways up. So I think we ought to set on this. And then the second thing is, we just went through a crisis where we had rolling blackouts, and then if we add a burden like this across the state and we expand it without taking a look at, I just hate to believe we're shutting people's power off when we're adding load to the system and we don't have the base load. We just heard the most compelling case why we need to look at this over the summer. So, I think I would be in support of tabling this bill, asking for an interim, looking for the proper tax method so we don't shift the burden to the ones that are just, driving gas vehicles. Make sure everybody's paying their fair share. Let's do it now before this gets going too far. And then, one's exempt from tax and next thing, that's the problem with this state. I mean, you look at all the exemptions, we got one club on one side of Wichita is exempt, the other one identical, is paying taxes, one is, I mean, that's our problem. We just need to find a good balance that's fair. And if I could do that, I'd probably support the bill, but I think we ought to wait. So I'd make a motion to table it.
Senator Francisco?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I would like to answer the question from Senator Hawk, which is what is to prevent price gouging? And it's the fact that I can take my charging cable with me and talk to somebody and plug into a regular 110 outlet and charge my car. So there isn't any requirement that anyone use one of these stations. They may have more difficulty getting that access, but they could certainly check into a motel or a hotel and talk to them. But there are other ways to access that. And that would be, I think, my same answer to Senator Olson, that most of the electricity that is being used by these cars is probably people plugging in at home, not in an electric charging station, because it's easier to do. You can do it at night. You don't have to figure out what else to do. So that would create a disparity between those people who have plugged in at home overnight. I'm assuming that you wouldn't want to charge that person money for using their dishwasher or their electric stove to help pay for our roads. So again, I think it's important to pay for our roads. That's why I supported the change we made that requires an annual fee on a hybrid or an electric vehicle. That money goes to roads. I think it's perfectly reasonable to review that, but that is separate from allowing these electric charging stations. So I think we should move forward with this, and then I'm happy to have any further discussion about what we need to do for transportation and how that might fit in. But they're really, I see them as differently, and I think if we tried to do anything to this bill, especially on the floor to change it, it would be considered non-germane.
You have a motion open and looking for a second, if there is a second. So we have a motion from Senator Olson to table, a second from Senator Pyle. Any further discussion before we vote? Senator Fagg?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I totally understand what Senator Olson's saying here. The question I have, is there anything in this bill that takes care of, this bill come before us and takes care of some things now that we'll need to address this summer? So I'm questioning, maybe it's along Senator Francisco's bill, if we take this, pass this bill, and then work on changes in the summer. Now, that's kind of where I'm coming from. There's reasons this is here and written this way to cover some issues. So just a thought.
Senator Olson?
What you're going to have is you're going to have more charging stations. And as we go along, this is just going to get tougher to properly tax. That's what it is. It's a tax. We have a gas tax right now that takes care of our roads. And, we've allowed the hybrids and a lot of these electric charging stations, but we haven't properly taxed at the proper rate or fee, whatever you want to call it. And, we're losing revenue in this state to maintain our roads. And so, I mean, and we just come through the crisis of having, you know, the excess power. If everybody's plugging in at home, we've got a power issue that probably needs to be looked at, that, you know, we're going to have more problems in the future if everybody's plugging in. And I think we need to address some of these things. But, you know, my major concern is, let's get our fees or taxes in order and make sure, because every dollar revenue we don't get today, we won't get tomorrow.
Senator Pyle, then Senator Corson, then Senator
Mr.
Peterson.
Chairman, I just, from some earlier comments from the senator from Douglas, I'm not familiar with electric cars, so I don't know, but it sounds like you can plug an electric car into a 110. I didn't know that you could do that. You can?
I'm
Okay.
plugging my car into a 110, that's what I
So-
use. And when we had the request to not use power, I made sure my car was not plugged in.
So then, if I have an electric car and I live in Jackson County, Missouri, and I drive across, I could literally plug into any 110 accessible outlet in Johnson County? Is that what you're telling me?
I think we're considering trespass, so it depends on if it's
Not if
critical
you're at a
infrastructure.
Walmart and there's a 110 in the parking
right.
lot. If you're at Walmart and there's a 110 out there on a pole and you can plug into it, that's not trespass.
Well,
Casey's, or you run it up to the side?
You could.
Okay, because this came up this morning in transportation with the electric bicycles that are going to be used in the parks. And anybody from out of state can come in, plug in and charge their electric bike. Now you're telling me they can charge their electric cars? My question is, why do I have to pay for that? Because somebody's paying for it. And it's going to be passed on to the consumer in Kansas while they're using our parks, our roads, totally free. And the comment from one colleague was, I like the price. So anyway, Mr. Chairman, I agree with tabling the bill until somebody comes with a way to pay for this. I mean, we just heard about higher costs, somebody sticking somebody on natural gas prices. Well, this appears to me that you're making it possible for out-of-staters to come in and stick it to us, you know, for the use of our roads and our parks. And to me, that's a problem. Now, if you want to address it and you want to bring the bill to register these bikes and these cars that are out of state and put a permit in place, then let's see it. But it ought to be attached to this. It ought to be attached to it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Corson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I think Senator Olson and Senator Pyle have raised very good and very valid points, but I just think it's a little beyond the scope of what this particular bill is trying to do, which, as I understand, is to give us some momentum to try to get moving in this direction. And I worry if we delay until we have a fully comprehensive plan that we believe covers the map of every conceivable issue that could come up with electric vehicles, you know, we'll just be waiting a long time. We'll be falling behind other states. I think these are good things for us to be thinking about. We should be thinking about them. There are issues that we know about that we should start trying to address. There are other issues that inevitably will come up that we don't yet know about as we continue to electrify more and more of our cars. And I think that we should continue to be forward thinking, but I just worry if we don't do this now, we are going to be back here in another year having made no progress on this. We'll be falling behind other states. And I don't think that this is something that we can say, let's not do this until we have a comprehensive plan. I think we need to get going in this direction. I think this bill helps us do that. It gets some momentum behind it. Inevitably, there will be other questions that this committee and others will need to take up and resolve. But I mean, I would support this bill, and I think it gets us moving in the direction we need to move as a state. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do think that this bill does not necessarily address the issues that we're talking about with the vehicle miles traveled and where we're going. It's the same thing. Missouri right now has less gas tax than Kansas, but they can still come over and drive on our roads. Right now, we have the registration in there. I think this bill will actually accelerate that conversation on the vehicle miles traveled and how we're going to pay for our roads. This bill simply takes it to declare them not to be a public utility and lets the private industry go in there. The private industry is going to go in and sell. And in the state parks, if you have a spot with a power outlet, it's about $20 in most of them. It's not free when you pull up at a campground with a power in it.
Senator Pop?
Thank you. Could the Chair of Transportation refresh my memory on fuel tax and federal dollars, how that works?
Senator Peterson?
On the commercial vehicles, it's divided up among the states where they drive. They pay one rate, an international rate, and then it's divided up among. But on the four-wheel vehicles, our personal vehicles, you pay at the pump. And Missouri being 10 cents cheaper, they're 10 cents cheaper right now. Right now, we're actually a little bit cheaper than they are by just a little bit on our electric vehicle registration.
Could you refresh and give me possibly any information as to how many Johnson County people drive across state lines to fuel up their vehicles?
I have no idea, but I've seen a lot of gas stations. I know one on the state line road that actually moved 100 yards so that they could have cheaper gas and increased its sales immensely.
So are we losing any fuel tax revenue?
Obviously, if they're going across the state line.
Okay, so while Missourians may be coming across to drive on our roads, our people are driving across the road to get their fuel to drive on our roads. So I think the argument could be made that something needs to be done to address the issue. But at the same time, we're talking about electric vehicles. And a consumer is going to shop. And my point being, they will drive across the line to get fuel tax lower. And they'll plug in their car where they can charge it for free. No difference. And so maybe the bill's not totally along that lines, but it's leading there. And if you have a little visionary outlook here, you can see what we're trying to talk about. And maybe we need a more comprehensive bill in the future to address some of these things. So.
It's obviously we need a more comprehensive bill to address some of these issues. But what you just said, the consumers are going to drive across the state lines to buy fuel. They're going to charge at home. If these private places cost a lot of money, those charging stations aren't cheap. So they're going to go to where it's cheapest. That's human behavior.
Why would I charge my car at home and pay my electric bill, pay those kilowatt hours, when I can go down to Walmart and plug it in for free?
I imagine if that started happening very much, Walmart would probably put some locks on their outlets. So, some areas actually have that. You have to go in and let them know that you're going to spend the night outside at a Walmart.
Senator Olson?
I think with these charging stations and where they're going is travel that's probably farther from home than one night. I think, what you'll see is if we pass this bill, there'll be these charging stations all up and down I-70, and you will see the charging stations will have a fee. And then when it comes time for us to make up the revenue for the, the gas tax, there's already going to be a fee on, and wherever the gas station or the truck stop that's put these in, they've actually captured the state's position, and then we'll hear, well, we can't add another fee on, and we got a chance here to get ahead of the curve before this really gets bad. We don't need this bill this year. We could have an interim. We could look at this from a world view of where we're going and get the right infrastructure on tax policy and fees for these electric cars, these hybrid cars, see the gas tax revenue we're losing. I mean, I hear the neighboring state, they keep trying to increase their gas tax because their roads, they say, are some of the worst in the country. And, if we don't capture the revenue we need from these electric cars, our roads in 10 years will be the same. And, you know, when every dollar we don't capture, or every penny, or however it works out, you know, we'll never get that back. I mean, you know, so I think this is an opportunity to fix and build a structure in Kansas. I don't think you're gonna stop, the charging stations in the future, but, you know, we're gonna go and allow probably a bunch of truck stops across I-70 and all the major routes, negotiate with the power companies to build these facilities. I mean, how are we gonna come back in next year and then charge them fees? They've already negotiated each other how to make their profit. It'll be like another deal. Then they'll be in a long-term contract and they say, we can't interrupt that contract, or, you know, you're gonna mess that up. And, so, I mean, we got a chance to get ahead of the curve, not behind the curve here. And, you know, I would rather we do that.
I have time for maybe one more. We're about running out of time. Senator Francisco, and then we need to vote on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I was going to say we should call the question if we're not ready to, but again, the electric vehicles are paying a fee, so they're paying for that. There isn't any reason to say a tax on a particular charging station should be the way that we pay for our roads and not through every other way where you can charge up your car. So this is, I don't see it as a tax. I think we're probably going to look more to a vehicle registration fee on electric vehicles. I'm happy to discuss that. I'd like to discuss that. I'd like to vote on this bill today.
We have a motion to table the bill from Senator Olson, a second from Senator Pyle. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. The noes have it. Division have been called, so all those who are in favor of tabling the motion, raise their hand. So show 2 hands, and all those against, same sign. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Yes, sir. Motion to adjourn. That, I believe that is reserved to.
I believe in the Senate Utilities rules, that is reserved to the chair.
You have,
Mr. Chair.
And I did, and I did happen to follow those rules. So, hold on. Just. Okay, the procedural rules, question of the adjournment shall be reserved to the chairperson. No motion to adjourn shall be entertained. So we are back on the bill. Any further discussion on the bill? Senator Francisco has a motion.
I would like to make a motion that the committee move Senate Bill 133 out favorably for passage.
Mr. Chairman, if we're going to work this bill, since we're no longer on motion table, I have an amendment.
If you have an amendment, we have a, first I guess we should have a. She doesn't have a second. Is there a second? Okay, we have a second. Oh, well, okay.
So, Mr. Chair,
Yes,
were you aware of this amendment?
I was not, but
Is there a rule that says I have to make you aware of my amendment?
no, there is not.
there's a rule, well, we could take other action or we could make a substitute motion. So
I believe that's correct, yes. I believe what we'll do is recess today at this point, and we will pick it up tomorrow at 1:30. With that, well, I believe that's right, because I think we need to, yeah, we need to, well, I know I will be here, so we'll recess until tomorrow, or we'll adjourn until tomorrow on this bill.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I
Senator.
believe Ms. Swati might have an answer to Senator Pyle's question, if you all would like to know.
Before we adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, in response to Senator Pyle's question about whether or not we trade, just an affirmation, we do not engage in trading. If in the event that we happen to overschedule, then KMGA will sell back, but we never intentionally overbuy, and any selling back is not in our best interest. It's typically, certainly not for profit, and it could at times be at a loss. So we are not engaged in trading. Our membership is very conservative in interacting with the market.
But there are times you do sell.
If in response to overbuying.
And can you choose when you do that selling? If
I
you had overbought prior to this and you had an oversupply, could you have sold some of that gas to somebody that needed it at that price?
I will find out if that sort of scenario would be allowed in KMGA's
Thank you.
bylaws. Thank you.
We recess for just a minute before. Senator Warren, I need to speak to you real quick. Yeah, we'll be in recess to go to the floor. I think what we're going to do is stay in recess until tomorrow and reconvene at normal committee time at 1:30, and we'll take this back up. Thank you, committee.